Welcome to The Safe Space, the podcast that's about those things in life that affect our romantic relationships and how we can identify and manage them for the benefit of ourselves and our relationships. I'm Yvette Johnson and my co-host is Ian Fraser. We both have a keen interest in mental and emotional well-being, as well as the dynamics that affect romantic relationships. And in this podcast, we'll share our personal experiences as we chat to a range of experts about the good, the bad, and the unhealthy of relationships. We hope you learn as much as we did from these conversations. Before we begin, though, a quick disclaimer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not offer mental wellness advice. If you or someone you know is in need of professional help, we have some links for you at the end of the episode and in the show notes. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Safe Space. It's good to be back. And this is our podcast today with a very special doctor that I have been wanting to meet with for quite some time. But before we introduce our special esteemed guest, Mr. Ian F., how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm particularly interested in this one because for those who don't know Yvette's passion, one of them, at least, is food. And, of course, that leads beautifully on to the topic which will be expanded upon, which is nutrition today.
Nutrition. So throughout our time doing this podcast, the issue of lifestyle keeps coming up. And so we thought, let's finally get some expert in to talk about lifestyle, eating, what's happening in the body that affects our mind, our soul, our emotions, because that will affect you in a relationship. It will affect your partner, the person you live with. So in studio today with us is the one and only Dr. Mark Opperman, and he is so welcome. Please tell us what you practice in.
Yvette, Ian, thank you for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. For me, one of my passions is taking medical information and digesting it into a language that the person who listens to these kinds of shows actually understand. So I am the owner of a tea clinic. I've been in private practice for the past 24 years. I have a background in obstetrics and gynecology, and then I went abroad and I specialized in aesthetics and anti-aging medicine, and then further specialized into functional medicine with a holistic approach to anti-aging. And functional medicine is about identifying the underlying cause, addressing the underlying cause, so that you can get that system that's no longer functioning optimal to repair itself. The tea clinic specifically specializes in hormone balancing and optimization, treating everything from metabolic disease to hormone imbalances like menopause, andropause, thyroid issues, etc., etc. So quite a wide range of interests. But the interesting thing is that all of them feed into one another, and therefore the holistic approach to functional medicine.
Dr. Mark, I'm going to be the stupid person in the room. What does T stand for in T clinic?
So, T stands for testosterone. So I started the T clinic about 14 years ago now. And it came about specifically because I was seeing in my male patients the complaint of fatigue, tiredness, lack of motivation and drive, physical performance, but as well as sexual dysfunction. And that's what they've been complaining about. So the majority of my patients are executives and management, etc., etc. And you start losing your edge. And I tried to find a common denominator why so many of my patients were complaining about this. And there was a movement that was started in the States back in the early 2005 about anti-aging medication, where we started looking at the benefits of human growth hormone. And from that, what people started exploring more about the roles of hormones in aging. And it was something that was really misunderstood and misrepresented, with actually very few studies on this topic. And as we started delving deeper and deeper into this, we started realizing the integral and important role that optimal hormone balance plays in maintaining a healthy homeostasis in the body. We hear the word testosterone and we immediately think men and muscles. And if we hear the word hormones, we think of menopause, hot flushes, and when men hear the word hormones, they think of their wives, with mood swings and irritability and stuff. The studies in the past couple of years have really turned everything that we used to know about hormones on their head. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. How many hormones do we have in the body that you know of?
We know of like 4 main ones, maybe 3, 4, but there are so many more, right?
Ian?
I'm going to be honest and say that I know there are hormones. I have no idea.
So we have over 50 hormones. So when I do educational speaking or public events, I start with the following question. Who is currently on menopausal treatment? Okay, and then a couple of people raise their hands and they say to me, okay, keep your hands up. Who of you are taking medication for your thyroid? And then a couple more people put their hands up. Then we go into the other stuff. Who is taking something like melatonin for sleep? And then the last one, and this is the one that gets everyone, is who are taking vitamin D supplementation? And then the whole room's hands are raised. And I say to them, so all of you are taking hormone replacement therapy of some form or another. So we know about the insulins and those kind of stuff. Insulins, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But there's more than 50 hormones. And I always refer to them as the symphony of hormones. If we go to a symphony and one of the instruments is out of tune or out of sync, it creates a noise. So your appreciation of that beautiful symphony is diminished. And our hormones is exactly the same. Hormones is a symphony. And if one of them is out of whack or out of balance, the whole of hormones balance.
The concert sounds like a grade 6 school concert at the end of the year where they're all playing out of tune, but they're on stage.
Yeah.
Understand is if you fiddle around with one hormone, because they work in cascades, you create imbalances in other hormones. And especially where that's true when it comes to hormone optimization and balancing. It's all about balance.
So you're saying you can't just go and add, because when you say you're doing the testosterone clinic, I'm thinking, oh, so you give people testosterone. So you can't just go and say, hey, here, have some testosterone and everything else will fall back into place for you. It's not that simple.
Absolutely not. So let's, for instance, take a look at your sex hormone cascade. It's very involved. You start with cholesterol, the father of all your steroid hormones is cholesterol. And from that, you make the mother of all the sex and steroid hormones, which is pregnenolone. From pregnenolone, you make progesterone. From progesterone, you make DHEA. From DHEA, you make testosterone. And from testosterone, you make estrogen. So hormones have effects. They don't have side effects. They have direct effects. So let's say that you only supplement testosterone. You will create negative feedback for everything above testosterone and positive reinforcement beyond testosterone. So you're going to increase your estrogen levels, but you're going to be suppressing progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA. All of those other hormones have direct effects on other systems. So you dysregulate the system. So often I have women coming into my practice on hormone replacement therapy for menopause, and they're on estrogen and maybe progesterone, depending on whether they have an intact uterus, but they're not on testosterone. So now they don't experience the full benefit. The hot flushes are gone. The night sweats are gone. But the mood swings, the irritability, the lack of motivation, the low libido, the low sex drive is not addressed. So they don't feel that this is working for them. For one simple reason, there's no balance in the system. So hormone replacement therapy is really, really, really difficult. It's not as easy as, okay, we take a look at blood tests and prescribe estrogen or progesterone, and that's going to bring about change. I always use the analogy of it's like baking a cake. So when you look at the blood tests, you see the ingredients of a recipe. It doesn't mean that what is there on the blood tests is going to give your patient the cake that they want to eat. So when you start changing ingredients, you as the practitioner become the baker. The patient is the only one that gets to taste the cake. So the patient needs to be involved in telling you, this is getting better, it needs a little bit of that, I'm not getting that, blah, blah, blah. And according to that, you need to adjust your treatment protocol. So it's a constant involved process. And I think the biggest thing that I can try and get across to people who listen to this is you need to be part of a process. This is about you on every single level. And what I find in practice is that different specialists look at their own micro-speciality. They treat that part. But with sometimes what they are treating is creating imbalances in other areas. And that leads to a decreased experience on the patient's part. You have to bring these things together.
So are you saying, therefore, that you should have one primary care doctor that is overseeing everything instead of going to these different doctors for these different aspects of your health? One person that advocates for you as a whole, holistic human being.
I don't want to necessarily say that you have to depend on one doctor. I rely on specialists to a great degree for certain things. What is so important is that we as medical fraternity and different individuals need to communicate with one another effectively. And I find that is where there's a shortcoming. You are treating a patient and they're going to someone else for a different thing. They don't come back to you sometimes and tell you, this is what the specialist has recommended. How do we adjust what you're doing so that it complements what someone else is doing? And I think that's the problem. Patients are scared. Patients trust. You know, when you walk into a doctor's room, you trust them, and so you should. But it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah. You have to take responsibility. I think, accountability for yourself. And also I've learned through the years that you have to really give the doctor more information than you think. All the details you can muster, get it out when he's consulting with you. Tell him everything that's relevant, whether you think it's not relevant, because you don't know what the doctor might pick and say, well, that's something that we need to look at.
In fact, I love that you're saying that. For you as a patient, when you walk into the doctor's office, you are paying for someone's time. Make sure that you share everything. Don't hold back. And then before you walk out, it is your responsibility to make sure that you have a very good understanding of what is happening to you, why you have been prescribed certain medications, what you can expect. In other words, be part of the process. I make a very distinct difference between adherence and compliance. Do you guys want to venture, I guess, what the difference is between adhering and complying?
I love your difficult questions. Compliance is following the rules according to a set of them from a book, from a manual that you're complying towards.
Okay, so a doctor tells you have to take your medication like this.
Yeah,
that's compliance.
That's a rule book.
What is adherence?
If you adhere to something, in my mind, it means to stick to. So you are essentially following a set of guidelines that somebody has provided to you, not necessarily by the book, but by you're sticking to what someone's telling you to do.
So
very close, but
I want to add to that.
Okay.
Adhering is being part and buying in, and not just blindly following. So I demand adherence from my patient. That's what you said. Taking responsibility and accountability. One of the biggest issues that I treat in my practice is metabolic disease. So if you do not understand the driving forces behind metabolic disease, the lifestyle changes that you have to make, you can't treat it successfully. So many of us just become compliant. You take your cholesterol medication, you take your insulin sensitizers, you take your blood pressure medication, but I'm compliant. Why am I not seeing the results? Simply because you didn't buy into the process. That is the difference between adherence and compliance.
Can I ask then, I'm reading into this, so let me ask you the question as to if my reading into it is right, that this is a holistic situation. You're not just looking at one particular thing. You spoke about the cascades of hormones, but not just taking your medication, but other outside things as well. I'll go through them in my mind: exercise, mental health preparation.
That's the biggest one.
Quietening your mind.
Absolutely. Managing stress.
Giving your mind time to just woosah. I'm a big one for that. And so many more that if you're not briefed on it by Dr. Mark, you won't know.
So what I find, it is, you tell a patient you have to exercise more, you have to have a healthy diet, you have to stop smoking, don't drink excessively. Okay, what now?
Yep.
How do I do that? That's the difficult part. So it becomes hand-holding. You have to understand your patient. What's going to fit into their lifestyle? How are they going to implement the requirements of lifestyle changes if you don't help them and give them guidance? You spoke about quieting the mind. One of the questions that I ask every single patient in my office is, what is the work that you do? And rate your stress levels out of 10, 10 being the highest. In my practice, I do not find anyone that gives me a stress level of below 7. So let's take a look. Why? I think in today's society, with everything that's happening around us, economy, political uncertainty, unrest, drought, traffic, you have so much stress. Stress is cumulative. If you don't deal with the stress in a proactive way, it keeps on building and building and building. There's such a fine line between daily stress that becomes chronic stress that leads to burnout and fatigue. And when you get to that point where you break, and it's literally the smallest thing that just breaks
triggers you,
and you go from long-standing chronic stress, which we are all battling with, to disengagement, anxiety, depression. Each of us have an innate ability to manage stress. Now, there's different types of stress, and not all of them are bad. you have something called eustress, which is phenomenally healthy for you. So think about eustress as good stress. Eustress is, I decide that I'm going to go bungee jumping. When you stand on that platform, your cortisol levels are through the roof. Your adrenaline has spiked. You're scared. Then you jump, and it's such an exhilarating feeling. And immediately after that, your stress, your cortisol levels and adrenaline levels drop. Now that gives you a wonderful way of practicing how to deal with stress. That's good stress. Then we have your daily stress. This is, your day-to-day running. Okay? So for most people, getting into the traffic is a daily stressor. It's those daily stresses that become chronic and where the cortisol and adrenaline levels don't decline sufficiently. And that leads to chronic stress. And that chronic stress is now we have elevated cortisol levels, elevated adrenaline levels. So what does cortisol do? Cortisol is responsible for managing your blood pressure, and it's responsible for managing blood glucose. So if my cortisol levels stay high continuously, my blood pressure elevates, my glucose levels elevate, leading to insulin resistance, and that causes disturbances in sleep, weight gain, hypertension, heart attacks, stroke, erectile dysfunction. Guys, if you can't get your willy up, go and take a look at what's happening to your stress levels. Sleep, incredibly important. If you're not sleeping properly, your cortisol levels keep rising. So there's so much that's contributing to that. And we don't deal with it effectively. Like you said, we need to become quiet. I set a challenge to my patients. Go and sit outside in your garden and listen to the sounds around you. Actively listen to the birds. See how long you can do that for before you start hearing your own voice in your head. So many of my patients come to me and say, I can't fall asleep. My mind's racing. Yes, you have to learn how to quieten. So breathing exercises, which is easy to do. You can do this while you're driving in your car, while you're sitting in a meeting. Simple. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for 7, and breathe out for a count of 8. What you immediately do is you start stimulating the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is the off switch for the sympathetic nervous system, that adrenaline, that fight-flight reaction. And immediately cortisol level starts dropping and you start relaxing. Do that before you go to bed at night time. Screen time is a nightmare. With blue light from devices like your mobile phone or your iPad or your laptop stimulates the production of cortisol. Melatonin is stimulated by red light. So cortisol levels spike in the morning. It's what wakes us up. And we wake up in the morning naturally because the light is changing. So you can manage stress, but you have to manage it actively. Diet, exercise, sleep, mindfulness.
So we started talking about hormones, and the reason we went to stress is because of the stress hormone cortisol, right?
Yeah.
And how that affects, you've just explained how that affects lifestyle, how it will affect your mood, your well-being, your sleep. And if all those things are wreaking havoc in your life, that's going to affect your mental health. That's going to affect your emotional stability. And that's going to affect your relationships.
Absolutely.
And don't you think that plays such a big role in why relationships are in such a state today, why the divorce rate is so high? Because people are not okay. They're not coping with their stress levels.
Yeah, we saw, for instance, in COVID, how many people did you hear about which through COVID realized, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know what?
Yep.
One of the first signs of stress is irritability, anxiety, fatigue. So when you start seeing those things, it leads to depression and eventually to complete disengagement. This is where I cannot get out of bed. I cannot go and see my friends. Things that used to be nice no longer have an appeal. I can't get motivated to do things like exercise or my hobbies, etc., etc. Diet plays such a big part of this.
Wait, is that burnout, what you just described? Is that collectively what we refer to as I'm burned out? Because everyone's saying, oh, I'm so burned out.
Yeah, you know what? Unfortunately, burnout is not yet a recognized medical diagnosis.
Should it be?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's not just in someone's head. It's
No.
not just in their imagination.
No, if you start feeling that you do not have a capacity to function optimally, not just at work, but at home, in a social environment, you are starting to show the signs of burnout.
And what do you do? What do you do when you... Because I'm there.
Number one, recognize it and accept it. So when I treat stress, I always tell my patients the following. The first thing that you have to do is recognize that you have a problem. Okay, I'm feeling burnt out, I'm feeling stressed. Number two is identify your stressors. What is it that's causing this? Is it my relationship? Is it financial? Is it work? Is it a certain person at work? And then you have to get to that point where, can I do anything about it? Now that I know what it is, what can I do about it? Can I avoid it? Yes or no? Most of the times we can't avoid it. So if I cannot avoid it, what can I do to change the terms of engagement? Do I address this? And if you cannot address it, if you can't change the situation, you're left with one option, and that's to walk away from it. And we don't do that.
We don't walk away.
No.
Wait. Just quantify walk away.
Let's say in a work situation, your expectations that you have towards your work that you have to do is X. If it's not met, what are your options? I either have to change my expectations or my culture. And if I can't do that, my only other option is to walk away from it.
As in resign.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think if we ask the majority of people, do they actually love and like what they do? Do they work to get a salary, or do they work because it's fulfilling? Now, I'm probably one of a handful of people, if you take it in the look of a broader society.
Look at that
can
smile.
say,
Look at that smile.
every single day when I walk into my office,
Yeah.
I love what I do. Why? For one simple reason, I make a difference in people's lives. The incidence of chronic fatigue and burnout, especially burnout, amongst professionals, lawyers, bankers, people in the medical fraternity, services like police, fire, etc., is enormous, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. That's not even to mention chronic fatigue and burnout in children. It's rife. The expectations that children have of themselves and how they have to achieve without the pressure that's put on them by their parents and society and schools is enormous. And I think if we look at the increase in mental health issues throughout the world, it's scary. Scary. It's mental health is a pandemic.
100% it is, 100%. Okay, so if you feel burnout is happening to you, but oftentimes people they don't know, okay, I'm burned out. They just feel off. They feel something's like, one of the things that stood out for me when I realized when someone said you have burnout is the first thing I said was, I no longer enjoy things I used to absolutely love.
Yes.
That's like I've been robbed. So now what do? Do I call the doctor? Do I take a nap? What do I do? Because is my GP going to help me with that? What is the thing to do when you feel like I've just lost it? I'm no longer living my life to the max.
Yeah, I think, you know what, the moment that you recognize it, reach out, seek help, medical professional, mental health professional, family, friends. Communicate this to them. Support someone else that's going through the same. It's one of the best therapies is becoming a support structure for someone else. Sleep. Focus on your sleep. Ask the question, when I wake up in the morning, am I refreshed? If you are not, what is the problem? Am I not getting enough sleep? So am I getting my 7 to 8 hours of sleep? If you're not sleeping enough. If you are, what is the quality of your sleep? If you're not, if you sleep enough, but you still wake up not refreshed, it's a problem of quality of sleep. Are you snoring? Do you wake up with a headache? Etc., etc. Go and seek help from your doctor to do a sleep test. And it doesn't have to be a full polysomnograph in a sleep clinic. It can be a home sleep test. There are places available that do that. And that's a topic on its own.
On its own, yeah.
And it's something that I think we should at some point do. Then, are you having a good diet? Am I drinking alcohol? So many people with burnout, depression, anxiety turn to substance abuse. Yeah. Whether this is alcohol, sugar, caffeine, recreational drugs, all of that will play a role.
I mean, that's a deadly spiral, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you exercising? 150 minutes of exercise per week for adults.
150.
150. It's not enough, actually, in my mind. It's 30 minutes of exercise per day. Moderate intensity. If you're going to do high intensity, at least 100 minutes. Children need 120 minutes of exercise per day. Our children today
They're
sit
not
in
getting
school.
that. Yeah.
They come home, they do their homework, and they're on screen.
On screen.
They're no longer outside getting enough physical exercise.
Kids need more exercise than adults. That's what you just said.
Absolutely.
They're not getting any of that.
No.
Okay, so now let's talk about nutrition, because and the microbiome in particular, because
I love the microbiome.
This is your thing. So I find it hard to believe, but it keeps coming up in our podcasts. What you're eating is affecting your mood.
Absolutely.
It's affecting your mood, it's affecting your ability to handle stress, and it's affecting, therefore, your ability to handle relationships and interactions with people. Social skills are being affected. That is the very angle of this whole season of podcasts that we did, is like, what is making relationships so hard? And it kept coming up that people are not eating right. People are not eating right, so it's affecting their relationships. Why? Because it's affecting their emotional stamina, their ability to cope with things, their ability to relate and to calmly communicate and that sort of thing. So you're telling me that the fact that I chose a McDonald's burger instead of, say, carrots and celery sticks literally will affect my relationship at the end of the day. Yes?
Absolutely. But you know what? I think we need to understand the microbiome a little bit better.
And what is the microbiome?
Okay. So we have the microbiota. Microbiota are all the individual organisms that live in the gut. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. I like asking questions. How many human cells do you think is in the body?
I'm going to say hundreds of millions.
A little bit more.
Trillions.
1 trillion. Around about 1 trillion. How many microorganisms live in your gut?
I've read it before, but I don't remember.
I'm going to
but
say billions.
It's a lot.
4 trillion and more.
Okay, so you're saying we have
We
more
are
of them.
more microbe than we are human. Without the microbes in our gut with which we evolved, we cannot survive.
So that is why the microbiome needs more attention.
Absolutely. Now, what is the average weight of a human brain? It's about 2.5 kilograms. What is the average weight of the microbes that live in your gut?
No idea.
No idea.
2 kilograms. The microbiome is the genetic material of the microbes, which is bacteria, viruses, fungi, yeasts, etc., that live in your gut. They function as an organ. Now, have you ever heard of the saying that the gut is the second brain?
Yes.
Yo,
What
this
is
is my
that
next
about?
question.
Please tell us that story.
So if we look at the brain is made up of neurons. Okay? So we have about 1 billion neurons that make up the brain. If you take a look at the neurons in your gut, we have 500 million.
There are neurons, as in brain cells, in your gut.
Absolutely.
Brain cells in your colon and your small intestine.
Absolutely.
But that's terrible because what we're eating is going in there. And if it's like bad stuff, it's
You affect
affecting our
the brain.
brain.
Now, the brain and the gut is directly connected to each other in 2 different ways. We call it the gut-brain axis. So you have a direct physical connection, which is your nervous system. The enteric nervous system has almost the same amount of neurons as the brain, and they're connected through the vagus nerve, as well as other nerves. So you can see what happens in the gut. You know when you get that butterflies in your stomach where you feel a little bit anxious? You feel it in your gut, but it comes from the brain. Now, the second connection is chemical, neurotransmitters. So serotonin, for instance, which we know is the happy hormone and that makes us feel good. The majority of serotonin, 70% of serotonin, is produced in your gut.
Okay, that is very profound, Doc, because think of people that I have a friend. She does not go to the toilet for a number 2 for like weeks. For weeks. How can that not be affecting her serotonin?
Of course it does. Absolutely.
Why is no one giving that attention in her life? Like
Because people are not speaking about it.
people are just
not
like
speaking about it. I did a podcast a couple of years ago on stool. We have seven different types of stool. How many people actually take a look at their stool every time that they go to the toilet?
okay, I do.
Because it tells you so much. You know what? You should have stool either in the form of soft serve ice cream or fully formed logs. So often we have either watery diarrhea with undigested food in it, or very foul-smelling sludge, or on the other side we have constipation where you have rocks or pebbles, etc., and that tells you so much about your gut as well as the microbiome because that's where it forms. Constipation, like diarrhea, is an indication of an underlying gut problem, and that will have an impact on how you feel. If you don't go to the toilet for 2 days, and I'm one of these, if I travel, I feel discomfort. I feel bloated, I have lower abdominal pain, and I just feel off. Regular bowel movements are so, so important. And constipation is classified as a bowel movement less than twice a week.
What does fasting do to that microbiome? And is it beneficial in this context to help give your gut a break?
Giving your gut a break from bad stuff, yes. Is that necessarily fasting? I'm going to disagree. I find that there's a little bit of controversy in the medical fraternity about the benefits of intermittent eating. I don't want to call it intermittent fasting, or time-controlled eating. I'm not a lover of it because most of the time people say, okay, I eat from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever. And then they fast for the rest of the day.
Yep.
For 8 hours, they are sleeping. And the body doesn't require a lot of energy during that time, but the brain does. And now you start your day and you don't have fuel for the brain and your muscles. And what do you start doing? The body goes into a stress reaction. It starts releasing cortisol so that you can control your glucose levels. And what do? You break down muscle. The liver has to start forming glycogen, etc., etc. Why? Because the body's energy needs during day-to-day physical activity is higher than when you sleep. So if you want to do intermittent fasting, make sure that you break your fast first thing in the morning. And then you eat until 1 or 2 o'clock. And then you fast and see how difficult that is.
So controversial opinion then towards you from my side is that when I fast and I wake up the next morning, let's assume that I've done a 24-hour fast. I have more energy. My brain is clearer. I feel lighter. I don't feel as cloudy.
All those toxins
Yes.
from the dysbiosis that's in the gut, that inflammatory stuff,
Yes.
you've deprived the body from pro-inflammatory components. So yes, it will work for mental clarity, but I am still not a lover of it. I do believe that you have to feed the body whole foods on a regular basis so that you keep it energized.
Okay, well, let's come back to that then, because both Yvette and I across the table here absolutely love anything to do with interesting food. We love it. I'm maybe going to put to you, what does a good diet look like? Everyone's different, we know that. But what is that base? What are we supposed to be eating to give our gut and those billions of things in our guts, biomes, etc., the best nutrition and the best way forward?
I would turn that around and say, what are the stuff that you should not have? The whole principle about a healthy diet is that you get enough of all the macronutrients. That means you need to get enough protein, enough good fats, and carbohydrates. The body needs all of them. So carbohydrates, energy, immediate energy. Fats, lipid metabolism, energy. Proteins, muscle, cellular processes, etc., etc. So those are your macronutrients. And then we can look at the micronutrients. And here you can think of all your amino acids and your minerals and trace elements, etc., etc. So a good diet is a balanced diet where you have all the food groups in moderation. Cutting out one of them leads to problems in some of the systems. I think people underestimate the need for protein, especially in developing children and as we get older. As we get older, our protein intake needs to increase. And that's one of the things that don't happen for the majority of elderly people because we start cutting down on meat because it's expensive. Patients who tend to eat a more vegetarian or vegan diet often don't get enough proteins. So your macronutrients starts to deplete. One of the biggest problems I think that we have is the readily available food sources, which are mostly highly processed. They are loaded with sugars, salts, and fats. For one simple reason, it's what makes food delicious. And that leads to a problem. So, for instance, if we go back to the microbiome, all these trillions of organisms, there's basically 4 main groups. You have your 2 big ones that we need to know about, and that's Bacteroidetes and Proteobacteria. Now, Proteobacteria is found in your large intestine, and free sugars. There's a difference between natural sugar and a free sugar. A natural sugar is what we find in our fruits and our vegetables, in our grains and in our dairies. Okay, so your fructose and sucrose and those kind of stuff. Free sugars are added sugar. This is the stuff that comes from cane sugar. And when we add added sugar, they are easily digestible. Okay? So they are readily available, so the body uses them first. And then there's an excess of them, and they start feeding this proteobacteria. And that leads to pro-inflammatory hormones. Proteobacteria is pro-inflammatory. And it causes a dysregulation in the ratio between the good bacteria, like Bacteroides, versus your pro-inflammatory ones. And that leads to inflammation, neuroinflammation, inflammation in the gut. There's a mucus lining that covers the gut. And these pro-inflammatory bacteria, the sugars, the alcohols, erode that mucous membrane. Now we give pathogenic bacteria a place to adhere to the gut cells, and it creates further inflammation. And what does chronic inflammation do? It damages the cells. It leads to cancers. It leads to erosion. And it works on the permeability of a gut. So think of a brick wall, and you start scraping out the mortar, the cement, and now you start getting gaps in the wall, and things start leaking out there. So now you get toxic components leaking out of the gut into the bloodstream. It activates the immune system. It leads to further inflammation. It acts on the brain, and it causes neuroinflammation in specific areas. For instance, the amygdala. Now, if you guys don't know what the amygdala is, it's the primitive reptilian brain. It's where we form emotions. So you asked that question earlier. If I eat something like a McDonald's burger or sugar or something like that, or alcohol, it changes behavior. Yes, absolutely. Because it changes and inflames the amygdala, where you form primitive emotions. So now again, you start stimulating fight-flight reaction.
With food?
With food, absolutely.
It sounds so simple, yes, yet it's so beautifully complex and so very crucially important, isn't it?
We have taken animal studies as well as human studies and took a look at behavior like depression, anxiety, and certain of your microbiome organisms directly decrease depression and anxiety. Healthy bacteria in the gut decreases the symptoms of depression and anxiety.
Okay,
And we didn't know about them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's only now that we start understanding the microbiome. What makes it so difficult is you cannot directly study it, because the moment that you take these things out of a gut,
they die.
They die.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to really study that. Fecal transplants. If we, for instance, take mice, and I'm going to talk about obesity here for just one single second. So if we take mice and we sterilize the gut, we take all the microbiomes out, and we give them a fecal transplant from a fat mouse. Those mice get fat. If we take a fecal transplant from a thin mouse, those mice start losing weight. Their behavior changes. So that just shows you how critically important managing of your gut microbiome is. What people don't understand is that your immune system is your gut. Every single immune cell that you have at some point will mature in your gut. That's where it learns what is good, what is bad, what is pathogenic, what should I be looking for as an immune cell. 70% of your immune system sits in the gut.
It sounds to me like pretty much everything is really rooted in the gut. You've just said that so much of your brain is your serotonin is made there. 70% of your serotonin is made in the gut. And now you're saying what you're saying now. So for me, it's like light bulb moment. The poop in the toilet that you're excreting is important. What does it look like? What is the state of it? Because that is what's going on inside you. Yeah. And you need to know based on what it looks like, what that tells you. So that you can get the help you need and modify the things that need modification for yourself, for your brain.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on embryology, but we developed from a single cell organism that had one opening on one end and an opening on the other end, where it ingested and excreted waste products. That's how we all developed. Now, in human embryology, we developed from 3 distinct tubes. You have a neural tube, which is responsible for your brain and your spinal column. Your spine. Not the spine, sorry, the vertebral column. Then you have a vascular tube, which is responsible for forming your heart and the vascular system. And then you have a gut tube, which is responsible for the formation of everything else. So all of them are connected to one another. And it's that connection, physical and chemical, that is so critically important in managing brain health, development, immune system, metabolism, etc., etc. And we're disturbing that.
By what we're eating. Wow. Okay. I think there's a lot more to be said about this. Doc, if people want to come and see you, where do they look?
The easiest place to get hold of us is at the T Clinic. Our website is www.the-t-clinic.com. But just Google the T Clinic, you'll find us. We're based here in Bryanston, Johannesburg. The telephone number is 010-824-1393. I consult with patients all over the world. So digital consultations and telephonic consultations is something that we do on a daily basis. As long as we have access to blood tests and being able to communicate with you on a regular basis, we can most probably help you.
Dr. Mark, I feel as though there's another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 podcasts where we could talk about these branches, because each of these branches, I'm hanging on to every word, and then we have to change because of time limits. But please come back. That's actually what I'm trying to say.
You know, but for me, it would be an absolute pleasure.
Oh.
I think in today's society, we have a couple of pandemics that people don't realize. The biggest one is obesity and weight gain. I'm going to give you shocking statistics. In the last 20 years, the incidence of obesity has more than doubled. More than 40% of adults is now obese. If we look at the incidence in children, 18 and all the way down to 1, 40% of children are overweight and obese. It's the driving force behind cancer, diabetes, hypertension, metabolic disease. It's scary. If we, for instance, look at the incidence of cancer in the last 10 years, the incidence of things like colorectal cancer has increased by 50%. We always thought about these kind of diseases as diseases of the elderly. Now we're starting to see things like prostate cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer in teenagers.
What?
And the driving force behind this is lifestyle and obesity and the microbiome. So I would love to come back and speak about this.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Safe Space. You can find Ian Fraser and me, Yvette Johnson, on Facebook. For feedback and questions, kindly email yvettejohnson7@gmail.com. If you need professional mental and emotional help, please don't hesitate to contact SADAG at www.sadag.org. Wishing you emotional, mental, and physical well-being.